Hi, everybody, and welcome to your cybersecurity lab here at Engineering Tomorrow. My name is Olivia, and I'll be leading you through your cybersecurity lab today. Let me ask you, how many times have you guys been on the internet today? Have you scrolled through TikTok today? Have you posted on Instagram? Or maybe you watched your favorite show on Netflix last night? I certainly did. And with so much use on the internet these days, it's so important that we make sure to keep our information safe. So that's the goal behind this lab, is to teach you how hackers try to gain access to your information and how you can keep it safe from them. So before we begin, I want to give you a little bit of background about myself so that you know who's in your classroom with you today. So I'm originally from Oakland, California, so I went to a public high school here in the Bay Area, and our school was interesting in that it had these different academies. So we had engineering academy, we had health academy, fashion, biotech, you name it, and it was just kind of a way for students to be able to take classes in areas that they were interested in without the pressure of having to choose a major like you would in college. So as you can probably guess, I was in our school's engineering academy. And I did some projects like the ones that you can see here in the pictures on the top left. So I built some bridges, I did some drafting, as well as an architecture class my senior year. And during that time, I was also involved with music and athletics. So played piano since I was 5, continued that through high school, and I was also on our school's rowing team. And then going into college, I continued with rowing. So, I went to the University of Southern California down in Los Angeles, where I got my undergrad in biomedical engineering. And then, as I was just mentioning, I continued with rowing. So I was on our USC women's rowing team as a coxswain. And then finally, during college, I had the opportunity to do an internship at Medtronic. So Medtronic is a medical device company. You may have seen them for their pacemakers or their insulin pumps. And there I was a quality engineer, which I'll talk a little bit more about what exactly that is. But I'm doing that same thing for a different medical device company called Stryker. So Stryker is also pretty well known. They make a wide variety of different products. If you've ever been in like an operating room or a hospital in general, you may have seen their logo on hospital beds or the camera equipment that they use for surgery. So that's the company that I currently work for, also as a quality engineer. Now, if you were like me, you're probably like, what's a quality engineer? Because I certainly did not know what a quality engineer was when I was in your shoes. But essentially, a quality engineer is the person who ensures that the product that you're putting out the door is up to the quality that you say it's going to be. I'm sure all of you guys have had the experience of buying something in a store or buying something online, and then either as soon as it gets to you or after a couple weeks, a couple months, it breaks. And nobody's happy about that. It causes lots of customer dissatisfaction and can even cost the company lots of money if they have to recall the product. So that's my role essentially at Stryker. I'm overseeing one of the product lines that we have and making sure that the quality is up to the standard that we want it to be. Now, getting into the lab, here is the team that actually helped develop this lab. So as you can see, it was a mix of both a professional engineer as well as college students. So we wanted to make sure that this lab would be as relatable and as fun for you. So that's why we wanted to make sure there was a mix of different backgrounds here. Now, intro to cybersecurity. What is cybersecurity? Cybersecurity is probably what you can think of from the word itself. So cyber having to do with computers or software, and then security. So it's how we can keep our technology safe from information theft or any damages to our computers. So this lab is going to teach you how you can keep all of your information safe nowadays, since so much information is online. Now, why is cybersecurity so important? Well, as I just mentioned, so many things these days are online, from your banking records to your medical records, everything is kind of inputted online. There's not that much paper record these days. And so that makes it actually easier for hackers to be able to gain information because if everything's on the internet, they can just find it if they're able to hack into that system. A cybersecurity software engineer is the person who is probably most involved with trying to keep your information safe. So they do this in a couple different ways. They should be able to identify different sites that are more prone to cyber risks and understanding the risks that can occur with different sites. They should be able to protect you by installing certain measures. So maybe like a software on your computer to keep your computer safe. They'll be able to detect when these cyber attacks occur, respond when they do occur, and then finally to be able to recover our information after these attacks if they do unfortunately happen. Now, getting into actual cyber attacks. What's the largest cyber attack that you all can remember? Now, as I pan through these different companies here, you can see that actually a lot of the companies that we're seeing that have been subject to cyber attacks are actually these big companies that we hear on a day-to-day basis. So things like eBay, CNN, Amazon, even NASA and Sony, these companies, these large corporations that, we might think are keeping our information super duper safe. Well, they've actually been subjected to these attacks before. And as I mentioned, it can cost these companies lots of money because not only do they have to gain our customer trust back, they also need to make sure they get that information back and are able to keep it safe so that it doesn't happen again in the future. Now we're going to go into different types of cyber attacks so that you can be more aware of the different types of cyber attacks out there to protect yourself. So we'll be going over 4 today. We'll be going over what phishing is, malware, hacking, and then finally tracking. So phishing is a social engineering attack that's usually in the form of a scam email designed to trick the recipients into sharing personal information such as passwords or credit card information. So as you can see on the bottom left there, it looks like there's an email from Verizon, the phone company, and it's asking the email recipient to update their personal information. So as the recipient of this message, you might see, oh, it's from Verizon, it's from my phone carrier company, and you might click on the link that they have there in the email for you to go update your information. Now, as soon as you click on that link, it will take you to a page that might look just like Verizon's page. They'll probably make it look exactly the same, but it's actually not. And as soon as you enter in your personal information, you're essentially giving your personal information right away, right over to them. So how you can protect yourself from falling for these tricks is to just be aware of emails and texts that are asking you for your personal information. Whenever there's links in your email where they're asking you to share that information, you should always have, raise a red flag, be suspicious, maybe get a second opinion. And something else that you can do is, say you are getting this email from Verizon. Well, you should go to the Verizon website itself first, go directly to the website, sign into your account, and see if they're actually asking you for that information. If they are, then you can enter that information there, but you'll be doing it on their site rather than through this email where the link might not actually be who you think it's going to be. Now, let's see how good you guys are at detecting scams. So looking at these 2 pictures, which one do you think is a scam and which one isn't, and why? Now, hopefully you guys got this one right. The one on the right is actually the scam. And the way that you can see that, or the way that you might suspect it, is that the one on the right is asking you for more information than you really would need, right? It's asking you to input both your username and your password. But if this really was iCloud, they would already know what your username is and they would only need your password. So anytime that you see something that might be suspicious and it's asking you for more information than you think that they would really need, that's when you should also raise a red flag and make sure that you aren't being scammed. Now, the next type of cyber attack is called malware. So malware is any software intentionally used to cause damage to your computer or your network. And as we've listed here, there's different types of malware. So there's things like viruses, much like what I just talked about, where they usually attach it to an email. And then as soon as you click on the link or you download the link, it downloads a bug to your computer. Or there's even things like spyware where they're able to monitor your device and track your information and track your actions as you go about using your computer. Hacking is another method of cyber attacks. So hacking is finding holes in information, and you've probably heard of this one before, but some ways that you can protect yourself from hacking is by creating strong passwords and making sure that you change your password every couple months so that it's not as easy for hackers to be able to find that information. You can also use something called multi-factor authentication. So you've probably heard of this one before, but essentially sometimes you use it for bank accounts where you enter your password, but then you also need to confirm on your phone via text message or a phone call, and that just puts like double protection up for you to make sure that you are actually the one who's trying to log on and gain access to that information. Now, the last method that we're going to talk about is tracking. So tracking is simply just apps that are able to know your geographical location. So you probably recognize a lot of these apps here: Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram. A lot of these apps, they have the capability of knowing your geographical location, whether you turn it on. Usually these apps ask you whether or not you want to turn it on. But if you're like me, when you post your story on Snapchat or Instagram at your brunch spot with your friends and you want to have that geotag on there, that's why you want the geographical location on, so that that app knows exactly where you are. But one area that is a little bit concerning about this is that if a hacker is able to gain access to your account and is able to access the information, they have the possibility of knowing exactly where you are, because these apps are tracking exactly where you are at that moment in time. Now, as we mentioned throughout this section, there are many ways that you can protect yourself, though, from these forms of attacks, such as creating strong passwords and changing them, updating the apps, like I mentioned. But the most important thing really is to just think before you act. We showed you like the scam emails. If you see anything like that and you think it might be a little bit suspicious, best to just get a second opinion. Or when you're creating a snap on Snapchat, or you're uploading something on Instagram, just make sure that you don't have any personal information in the background. So, your ID is not in the background, your home address isn't in the back of your TikTok video. So things like that, just double check before you're posting so that your information can't fall into the wrong hands. Now, this next section is about how companies hide information from hackers. So the method that they use is called encryption. You've probably heard this one. So what exactly is encryption? Encryption is a way of encoding information so that outsiders can't read it. So the original information is encoded into something called ciphertext, and then it's sent to the recipient and then decrypted. So it allows only the recipient to be able to see the original message. Now, one famous type of encryption is called Caesar cipher. So as you can see in the diagram here on the left, essentially each letter is shifted over by a certain number of letters. So you can see here A is shifted over 2 to become C, and then to decrypt it, you just shift it back. So something like dad, so DAD, would translate into FCF. So this shifting is like a key. So I like to think of it like this. It's like a decoder wheel, and then you have a key that's like how many letters you're going to shift it over by, and you use that same key to unlock it. But what's the risk of Caesar cipher? As you can probably guess, Caesar cipher is really easy to crack. As soon as you know what the key is or how many to shift the letters by, it's really easy to just be able to shift the code right back, and you'll be able to read the original message. So this form of encryption is called symmetric encryption. So as I just mentioned, it means that the key is the same like forward and back. So both for encryption and for decryption, it uses the same key. But what's a more secure way to do it? Another way is called the Vigenère cipher. So the Vigenère cipher solves the problem of the Caesar cipher being too easy to crack. And so we're going to watch this video here, which essentially you use a number of different keys to both encrypt and decrypt the message.
Here's a real example of a polyalphabetic substitution cipher. It is called the Vigenère cipher. Vigenère cipher has a clever way of representing possible mappings from one letter to another as a matrix. Here we encrypt the plain text by processing one letter at a time across the columns. We use the letters in a key to tell us which row to look at the mapping. Now suppose we have a plain text and the first 3 letters are ATT, and we have a key. In fact, the key stream should be as long as the plain text. So this will be lemon, 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 and go on. Here, the first 3 letters of the key stream are LEM. Now let's see how we can encrypt the plain text according to the key. We encrypt the plain text by processing the letters one at a time across the columns. The first letter is A, so we look at column A. We use the letter in the key, L, to look at the row to decide the mapping of A. Here the mapping says L, which means in the ciphertext A has been mapped to L. The next plaintext letter is T. So we look at column T, and we use the letter in the key to look at the row to decide the mapping. The letter is E in the key. And so we look at column T and row E, and the mapping is X. This means that the ciphertext of T is X. The next plaintext letter is T again. So we look at column T again, but here the letter in the key is M, so we look at column M. And the mapping of column T, row M, is F. This means that the ciphertext of plaintext T is F. Therefore, for plaintext ATT and key LEM, the corresponding ciphertext is LXF.
All right, so hopefully that video made sense to you, but as I like to continue with that visual that I just showed you earlier, essentially the Vigenère cipher is like the same decoder wheel, but instead of having just one key, you have many keys, as you can see here. Now, this is a form that's called asymmetric encryption. So I just talked to you about what symmetric encryption is. And as you can guess, asymmetric means that you have multiple keys. So the terms is a public key as well as a private key. So you have a public key that anybody can see, and that's the way that you encrypt the message, but you have a private key that's only for the recipient, and that's the way that they can decrypt the message. So this video here is on asymmetric encryption and gives you a little bit better of idea of how that is used.
Encryption is the process of taking a message and scrambling its contents so that only certain people can look at your message. There are two types of encryption, symmetric and asymmetric encryption. Let's first take a look at symmetric encryption to understand why asymmetric encryption was created. To do that, let me introduce you to Alice and Bob. Alice has a sensitive document that she wants to share with Bob. She uses an encryption program to protect her document with a password or passphrase that she chooses. She then sends the encrypted document to Bob. However, Bob cannot open this message because he doesn't know the passphrase that Alice used to encrypt the document. In other words, he doesn't have the key to open the lock. Now comes a real problem. How does Alice share this passphrase securely with Bob? Sending it through email is risky because others might find the passphrase and use it to decrypt any messages between Alice and Bob. This is exactly the kind of problem that asymmetric encryption intends to solve. It is comparable to a mailbox on the street. The mailbox is exposed to anyone who knows its location. We can say that the location of the mailbox is completely public. Anyone who knows the address can go to the mailbox and drop in a letter. However, only the owner of the mailbox has a key to open it up and read the messages. So let's now go back to technical details. When using asymmetric encryption, both Alice and Bob have to generate a key pair on their computers. A popular and secure way for doing this is by using the RSA algorithm. This algorithm will generate a public and private key that are mathematically linked to each other. Public keys can be used to encrypt data, and only the matching private key can be used to decrypt it. Even though the keys are linked together, they cannot be derived from each other. In other words, if you know someone's public key, you cannot derive his private key. If we retake our mailbox example, then the mailbox's address would be the public key, something that everyone is allowed to know. The owner of the mailbox is the only one who has the private key, and that is needed to open up the mailbox. Let's now take a look at how Alice and Bob can use asymmetric encryption to communicate securely with each other. They start by exchanging their public keys. Bob gives his public key to Alice, and Alice gives her public key to Bob. Now Alice can send her sensitive document again. She takes the document and encrypts it with Bob's public key. She then sends the file to Bob, who uses his private key to unlock the document and read it. Because they use asymmetric encryption, only Bob is able to decrypt the message. Not even Alice can decrypt it because she doesn't have Bob's private key. The strength and security of the asymmetric encryption now relies on Alice and Bob to keep their private keys well protected. If an attacker steals Alice's private key, it can be used to decrypt all messages that are intended for Alice. However, the attacker cannot decrypt messages that were sent by Alice because that requires Bob's private key. Asymmetric encryption is used in a lot of places where security really matters. You might not be aware of it, but every time you visit a secure website via HTTPS, you're actually using asymmetric encryption. It's also being used to securely send emails with the PGP protocol. And one last example, Bitcoin also uses asymmetric encryption to make sure that only the owner of a money wallet can withdraw or transfer money from it. So now you know how asymmetric encryption works and what the differences are between asymmetric and symmetric encryption.
All right, so finally diving into what you're actually going to be doing in the lab today. So your task is going to be encoding and decoding encrypted messages. So how we're going to do it is we are going to be using a program called CyberChef. So I'll give you a little demonstration in a second on how you use CyberChef, but essentially this program allows you to encrypt and decrypt any message that you want to type in there. So feel free to play around, and there's many different types of different ciphers that you can play around with. All right, now hopefully you were able to navigate here into CyberChef. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we have the Operations tab. So this is where you're able to choose any cipher that you want to play with. Today, I'll be showing you just how to use this base 64 one. So you can input anything, any message that you want, anything random. I'll just go ahead and type Taylor Swift. And then I'll drag in to base 64. So I want to translate this message to base 64. And you can see here, this is how they're kind of jumbling up the letters in your code. And then you can see right here from the output, this is what it gives you. Now, if I wanted to just double check, I'll just go over here, copy this message. I'll get rid of the to base 64 and drag in the from base 64. And then I'll add in that message that you guys just saw. And then as you can see in the output, it gives me back my original message. So you can even play around with adding multiple different ciphers. So you can use base 64. You can also come in here and drag in the Vigenère cipher. You can add many different ciphers on top of each other to make it more complex. So feel free to encrypt and decrypt messages throughout the student workbook using CyberChef. And I hope you guys enjoy this lab. All right, if this lab is interesting to you, or if this topic is interesting to you, we have some areas that you can continue to explore. So you can explore information technology, software development, network security. And then if you were to get into this field in college and you wanted to choose a major, software engineering or computer science, those two are definitely the most relatable. So yeah, I encourage you all to continue to be curious, reach out if you are interested, and use this as your starting point if you want to learn more. I hope you enjoyed this lab here at Engineering Tomorrow. And if you're interested in any more, feel free to sign up, and I'll see you guys next time.